On today's episode, we are not only discussing While Idaho Slept, but using it to go back to the beginning and bring in new evidence and information that we have learned in the last 2+ years. Do you think Jack S. will be testifying? Why don't we know where Bethany was that night? How bad did Dylan's interviews contradict each other? We'll discuss all of this, look back at some old footage, and wrap it all in the context of this book. We hope you will join us. As always, everything we discuss is for entertainment and is speculation. Please like and subscribe, and definitely join our discussion in the comments. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello. We're diving back into the Idaho 4. We're in season 3.
Yes.
And I don't know how many episodes in, but this will be the first in a new series in season 3. We have listened to the book While Idaho Slept. This book kind of came out very early on. So I wanted to listen to it because, it's been 2-some years since all this happened. And I wanted to kind of put myself back to the beginning, right? What were some of the theories? What was going on at that time? How were we feeling? What were some of the things that we were talking about? I remember the first few weeks, everything surrounded that grub truck because it was the only, it was
the only thing that was
out. And we had a lot of, discussion about it's this guy and it could be that guy. And look at this person's lurking in the background. So I kind of wanted to take myself back to that. I have Audible and I had some free credits. So I was like, well, let me try this one. And I listened to it and it reminded me of what was going on back then. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book itself, and then we can maybe jump right into the prologue and the first few chapters and talk about what's going on.
Yes. While we do this series, we're going to be covering the book and discussing it, but it's going to give us a chance to pull in some of the speculations and theories and videos and just things that came out either about the topics in each chapter or even to bring in what we know now that we didn't know back then.
Right.
So it really lends for a interesting discussion, I think. But so While Idaho Slept is written by J. Reuben Appelman, and different from the first book that we covered by Howard Bloom. That book was realistic fiction or I forget how they talked about it.
Creative fiction, artistic
He
fiction,
had more artistic liberties with the way that genre was set up. This book, however, While Idaho Slept, is supposed to be nonfiction. So he's just writing the facts that he knows and can find out at the time.
Yeah. And we listened to the book. We didn't read it. So we don't know if there's quotations where someone's being quoted. So we don't know where the facts, according to the author, completely lie. But I think we're just kind of regurgitating some of the things he said and offering our own opinions as to what happened in the book.
Yeah, and we discovered that with the last book, because when it got to the prologue after the book, or the epilogue after the book, he actually said, if you see anything in here that's written in italics or some special thing, we were like, oh, we can't see that because we're listening to it. But so the audio book is like, I don't know, 1 million chapters long, but the actual book's like 288 pages. So it started with a prologue, and he just gets right into it with like the murders themselves, like just starts off with that and how they were killed in their sleep and it was overkill, and he really gets a bit graphic with like,
well, that's the main character of the story, right? The story is this murder. What happened while Idaho slept? It's this murder. So that's what the prologue is about. Now we're going to learn the characters surrounding this main event, but this is the main victim. So we're gonna we're gonna learn more about the event itself and the people involved in that, but the main point of the book is this murder, and that's what he's talking about in the prologue, right? So we have that at the beginning, so we know what all these other things that are going on around it, how they're related to this one main event. So
it was just interesting because some people might choose to be more flowery and I don't know, paint a scene of the town or something, but no, he got right into it. And then he's just like, okay, this happened, this has turned into a worldwide investigative case with people online being very interested, and he starts talking about the citizen sleuths, he calls us. And I've just recently heard another nickname, we're the keyboard detectives that are online. Like, we don't do investigative work, we're just discussing things. But on YouTube, he specifically mentions YouTube.
And well, let me back up for a second. I think that this isn't theatrical.
No.
Right. So if you were writing or if you were writing a screenplay, or you wanted to read a mystery novel, or you were watching, you know, some docuseries or whatever, the murder itself wouldn't happen till episode 2 or 3, and then all these characters would come in.
That's true.
You know what this is, this seems very informative, right? And that's why we know what the main event is right at the beginning, because he's going to talk about everything surrounding this event, which includes what Kim is talking about now, which is, you know, how we play a role in this as keyboard detectives, internet sleuths, and things like that, podcasters. But I guess I wanted to make that point, that if you're looking at this book as some type of, you know, mystery novel or some type of thriller read, it's not that. It's here's the event, and I'm going to talk about all the participants in this event as we go through the book.
It reads differently than the other one.
That's what I was trying to say.
Howard Bloom was more creative and trying to make it seem story-like, and this is just more factual.
Thanks. She's the literary expert. So she knows what I'm talking about.
You know, it's interesting. He just states that Fox News and News Nation were the very first news stations on the scene. I thought it was interesting. He said that paparazzi showed up right away, and I'm like, that's a weird term. I like, but maybe like, I don't know. You think of like people that are selling to TMZ and stuff like that. So maybe
that's a TMZ thing.
Yeah. And then he mentions Steve Gonsalves's interview, one of the first ones where, oh my gosh, your heart just broke for him, where he was talking about what happened and had the line like, I paid for that funeral.
Well, and the reason he said it was because he went out and was talking to the news media, and they were saying, don't talk about how your daughter was murdered. Don't, you know, give any details. And he's like, look, I paid for that funeral. This is my daughter, you know, and I am going to appeal to the public because I want to find out who did this, and you're not going to muzzle me. So he was very defiant on day 2, I think.
It was very early on. And again, this is mentioned in the prologue. He's like jumping right into it. And we know that father has spent a lot of time on, and still on, news stations giving interviews. And a lot of the time it was his little tidbits that he would drop that we would get information from. So he mentions that. And then the very first press conference by the police with Chief Fry, and just pointing out that there was no murder weapon and no leads.
Right.
And then we're covering the first 4 chapters, and I kind of liked how he set this up. The first chapter is about Kaylee and Maddie. The second one's about Bethany, or I'm sorry, Ethan and Zanna. The third one's about Bethany, and the fourth one's about Dylan. So in chapter 1, he just gets right into that night with them. Like, they're at the corner club and seeing her ex-boyfriend.
Who's they?
Kaylee and Maddie.
Kaylee and Maddie.
Chapter is about. And I'm going to pause it here and pull up. I said I'm going to bring in some images. So this is a still shot from the video camera that was inside that night. So that's inside the corner club. And that's Kaylee there with her back to us, and Maddie's in the black jacket. And supposedly everybody thinks that that's Kaylee's ex-boyfriend sitting on the stool talking to them.
Okay.
Okay, so the girls leave the corner club and walk to the grub truck.
Correct.
And so the first thing that came out to the public for us to know anything, any kind of information about that night, was the grub truck video.
Right. That came out pretty quickly, didn't it?
Very quickly. Kaylee's sister was, I'm sure talking to tons of people and finding out where they were that night and everything. And when she found out they were there, they do a Twitch stream. And so she knew they had video cameras. So she got a hold of that immediately.
Gotcha.
So, and it's like 4 hours long. And I can't tell you how many YouTube channels played every second of that thing and just analyzed all the parts of it. But I trimmed it down to just a couple minutes just to show the moment that you see the girls round the corner and show up on screen. Like, oh my gosh, my heart dropped when I saw that. Like, it was just chilling. And then I'll point out some of the people that are at the grub truck that everybody was talking about. So there's a girl in a white jacket. She's up at the corner. She's up at the counter, and I'm going to hit play. And as soon as I hit it, they're going to come around the corner. Oh, here they come. This also let us see the condition they were in, because they were out at the bars. There was a football game that day. I'm sure they were like partying all day. And this is where Kaylee says, when she orders, she says carbonara. And Maddie's just kind of in her own little world. So the guy she's hugging, I think he has a jersey on. Everybody talked about him. Yeah, that's number 9. So this has 4 squares. So the guy taking the orders on the top right, the guy's making the food on the bottom right, the ordering windows, the top left, and then the people in the bottom left right now. The guy with the yellow sweater on and the hat on backwards, we gave him the nickname of Christmas Jesus because he's just got that long hair and the sweater. But everybody was talking about him for a while because he got stopped by the police later that night. He took a sign that was like outside, like a road sign or something, but then I guess he had a bump on his head and everybody was speculating about that. So this is now just the bottom left screen where they're waiting for their food. And this is where everybody was like, who's this guy in the leather jacket and the white hoodie? Because at one point his hood was down and everybody, and then he put his hood up. Like, it seemed like, oh, I see a camera, let me put my hood up. And nobody knew who he was, but he's just standing there by the girls. Like, if you just watch him, like, why? He's not ordering food. He showed up with them. So at the very beginning, nobody knew. This guy coming up to the counter, a lot of people have talked about, he looks like a brother of somebody that would give him reason to be mad at the girls. So everybody just dissected every person at this grub truck, like who they are, any possible connection. Maddie was trying to steal everybody's food, I guess, at the counter. And then you'll see her interact with, we call him Hoodie Guy, the white hood. And everybody said she was pointing at him. I think she'll do it in a few minutes and like flips him off. I could never really see her flip him off, but see, they're kind of like going back and forth. Kaylee's on her phone a lot. So now they kind of lighten up, and they're kind of, but see Matt or Kaylee nod her head towards the hoodie guy, like she was saying something about him. And then what is she doing right there?
Looks like she's taking a picture of selfie with him in the background.
Somebody in the background. Yeah, him, somebody. She lifted her phone up over her head.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's videoing Maddie because I think Maddie was being funny. And then they got their food and went right around the corner to go get in their ride. Hoodie guy throws his hand up like, what the heck? And then he takes off. So this was the first thing that came out. And you can imagine the speculation. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
You just see the girls show up with some guy tagging along, watching them.
Right.
Like, who is this guy?
Right.
I mean, that poor guy. So we found out who he was. His name is Jack Showalter. And he's a frat boy. Everybody found out everything about him. I mean, he had his hands in his pockets. He looked like he had something in his pocket, like maybe a weapon, like just all this speculation. And I think he got just slammed so much online that they released this video.
Kaylee and Maddie were talking to Jack the night of the incident, right?
Yeah, at the corner club.
And we find out later that they were calling him late at night, which we'll get to in a little bit. But in between there is this video that you're about to show, which is what?
It was a street camera that caught them walking from the corner club to the grub truck. And so while they're walking past this camera, you can actually hear a conversation between them. And Kaylee says, Maddie, what did you say to Adam? And Maddie says, I told Adam everything.
Okay, now who's Adam? Because we've only talked about Kaylee, Maddie, and Jack D.
So Adam is a bartender at the corner club.
Okay, same place
they were at.
Gotcha.
And I believe that he is Jack D's roommate also.
Oh, okay. All right. Makes sense. All right. There's a connection.
Yes.
Okay.
So there was lots of speculation about that. So I just wanted to show that actual clip.
Let's see it.
What did you say to Adam? Like, I told Adam everything.
So the father who speaks out all the time, Mr. Gonsalves, made it seem like, oh, just like girl talk, like no big deal. The online community went down rabbit holes after rabbit holes about what that could have been. They're best friends, right? And if you're like, hey, what did you say to that? And I told him everything. Is it something that's going to cause problems? Then a lot of people are like, well, what could that have been? I think there were connections between what job Kaylee was going to be leaving school for and this Adam guy. So was it something with that? There was speculation at one time about, rugs in the house and that someone might have done something with them. And was it something about that? So this clip was super important at the time to get everybody talking and, trying to figure out what that could be. And to this day, we don't know.
So your question was, we don't know what else was said. We don't know, right? Because we have a closed hearing. So I think one of the witnesses might be this Jack Showalter, if at all. And he could probably shine light on what was the conversation before you got to this camera and what was the conversation after you left the range of this camera. And he could probably fill in those blanks.
That's an important point you just made there, because I was just watching someone else's video and they were saying that documents haven't dropped yet, but on the case summary, there are more subpoenas going out. So they're going to be issuing subpoenas for people to come testify. And the names are probably going to be redacted when those documents do drop. But so now everybody's speculating who's it going to be? You know, yes, it'll be law enforcement or the people who maybe handled the different specimens and things like that with all the testing that's being questioned. But that person, but this Jack Showalter, you're one of the last people with them, the last person outsider with them before this happens. You would think, yeah, he's going to get called.
Except for the rideshare person. Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Second to the last person.
Yeah. But getting back to chapter 1, so it kind of states a little bit what Maddie and Kaylee were doing that night. What else did he give us about them, Maddie and Kaylee?
Just them going to, we know that they were at the bar, they went to the grub truck, they got a ride share home, and went home and ate their food and went to bed.
Okay.
Is according to the book.
Because now when they get home,
right,
and they're at home, you know, sometime later, they are making a ton of phone calls to Jack D, who is the ex-boyfriend.
Yes.
And my question to you was, you know, when we were listening to the book, I was like, you know, if they had cleared everything up at the club, why are they frantically trying to call this guy at 2 a.m? You know, and you had made the point, well, we have this video of them walking that maybe more was said and maybe they're trying to clear it up.
That's what it seemed like.
Okay.
That's what it seemed like.
That seems logical to me. But when we were listening to the book, I was like, why did they have, if they just spent the night with him, why did they have to keep calling him, you know, frantically afterwards? Like, what was the issue, you know, in that? So
honestly, back in the very beginning, when we found out about the phone calls to him, to me, it also seemed like, and this might have been before the video was released, but calling for help or calling that because something's happening, like, do they know something is weird and happening, and they're trying to get a hold of him for some kind of information, you know, and until that video was released. And then what did you say to Adam? And then it's like, okay, well, maybe they're calling about that.
Who ordered the DoorDash?
Zanna.
Oh, okay. All right. So it wasn't one of those.
No.
Okay.
So we can go on to chapter 2 is about Ethan and Zanna.
Okay.
This is the chapter where they really talk about Ethan and such a nice kid and everything. When they were talking about Zanna, they talked about her troubled childhood and, you know, her mom being in trouble. And so she was always with relatives or something when she was younger. I thought it was odd when they were describing Zanna. They said, you know, she was so friendly and, you know, knew everybody and so friendly that she even had a lot of her friends' mom's phone numbers. And that was in this book. And I thought, that's kind of a weird piece of information to put in there.
Was she the marketing major?
I think she was.
Okay, because they went.
She was.
I can't remember which student they talked about, but they said one student was a marketing major who really was the type of person that was outgoing, knew everybody.
That's Zanna,
which makes sense. That maybe she's got friend of a friend of a friend's phone number, you know, in her phone.
So when they're talking about Ethan and Zanna during that night, they talked about how Ethan had taken his sister to a sorority dance, and then he's a triplet. So his brother took her roommate, and then he met up with Zanna later, and they went to his fraternity, the Sigma Chi. They had a party, and we know they were there. But then there was like a period of time that we don't know where they're at, and there's speculation that I think Zanna's dad came out and said that he had talked to her at midnight and she was home eating pizza with Ethan. But then maybe he was confused that maybe it was the night before. Like, But there's a chunk of time where they're unaccounted for.
And this is, we talked about this when the book was going on. I think we paused it and I said, didn't they leave the party, go across the band field to their apartment?
That would be the natural course because it's a super short walk.
So that's what the author said, but you kept saying that they were unaccounted for.
Because all the reports were that they were last seen at the Sigma Chi house, I think around 9. And then the PCA says everybody was home and in their beds by 2.
Right. But you had thought that after the party, they'd went somewhere else, and that's when their time was accounted for. But what I was trying to say during the listening of the book, that they state in the book that they left the party and crossed the band field to their apartment.
Okay.
So do you know of something else that they were spotted somewhere or
no,
that contradicts that statement from the book?
No, but I've never heard an official report saying that they left the Sigma Chi house at 9:00 and we know they were home at 9:00 or 9:15.
Yeah,
5-minute walk.
Okay.
Yeah, that time isn't accounted for. All right, what notes did I write down here? Okay.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I want to say about Ethan and Zanna is the author of the book really, like, I think he was trying to put everybody in a good light, like say good things about Kaylee and Maddie and even Dylan, and everybody. But boy, he spent an exorbitant amount of time saying what great people these two were.
Yes.
And I don't know if that was their social setting in school, if they were the ones that people tended to gravitate to, but it almost seemed, and I did want to talk to you about this, it almost seemed contradictory because I thought I had heard that at that party that they had left around 9, that there was some type of argument or fight, which kind of contradicts all the niceties that this author was bestowing upon these two. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's another huge rabbit hole. Like that there was the rumor, speculation, whatever, is that there was a fight at the fraternity house that they were involved in. Then people dove into that, and supposedly they have these fight clubs, like the fraternities and sororities, like have these like underground, I don't know if they bet on them or what, but like scheduled, you're going against this like fight clubs. So none of that I have seen has been verified. Even like that's a strong rumor. Like that's there's been many different people that maybe thought they heard it from someone who was part of the frat or found videos of things. And I don't know for sure. No one knows for sure.
Okay. All right.
But so you would think if they got home, like whatever time they got home, there's cameras. So they supposedly caught the car on camera. They supposedly, have a dog barking on camera, that you would think you would see them, that the police could verify what time they got home, but they haven't told the public.
Yeah, I'm sure they have all that information. I mean, every camera in that area has probably been scrubbed to say who's where and what time. And we'll probably hear that during the trial. But the good thing about this book is this is at the beginning where we know nothing, right? And we are connecting a lot of what they say in the book to events of today. But I like the innocence of the book in its time when it was written, because it makes me go back and think, okay, what was happening at that time? Where was our mindset? Who was the suspects, people of interest, who were the shady characters, who weren't the shady characters, And I think that's what this, because so many people had such a huge spotlight on them, like you mentioned, Hoodie Guy.
Oh yeah, he was number one suspect for a long time, like online, like.
And now it's, you don't even hear his name or even the descriptor that he was given, nothing. But at the time, that was for sure the person. I'll bet my life on it that that's the guy who killed him. I don't know who said that, but somebody was willing to bet their life on that was the murderer, but that's how the ebb and flow of this goes. So that's why I kind of like the innocence of this book going back to the beginning, because we didn't know anything. We didn't know anything. And the facts, the true facts that still remain as part of this case are interesting, that only maybe the evidence or the structure of this case, only those things that have lasted this test of time, unfortunately, seem to be a lot of the things that lead to Bryan Kohberger, which we'll get into a lot
in
later,
your opinion.
in my opinion. But a lot of that is, those are the things that we talked about at the beginning, and we're still talking about today. We're not talking about Hoodie Guy today.
We haven't even gotten into that yet,
but that's what I like about this book, is that they're laying out some of the things that, whoa, this is pretty crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, like, why, you said like they probably know what time Zanna and Ethan got home. Then why did I hide that? Like, why can't that be public information?
Because to answer that question, I don't know if you're really truly asking me. I'm going to assume you are, but I think that let's put a gag order on this case. Okay, I'm going to have a strict rule about putting a gag order on this case. But this isn't really a big thing, so go ahead and leak this and leak this. You can't do that. If it's a gag order, it's a gag order. If it's not a gag order, it's not a gag order. So yeah, it seems insignificant. So why don't they release it? Because there's a legal gag order attached to this case.
I think the gag order is about talking about it. The
any evidence,
redacting and
any evidence.
Yeah.
They're just not allowed to talk about any evidence of the case. And if the evidence of the case is, Zanna and Ethan got home at 4:08, I don't want that shared with the public.
Well, those are the things that they seal. They seal those documents. Yeah, there's a lot sealed. So chapter 3 is about Bethany, and boy, she seemed like she lived a charmed life. Her dad's a dentist. He went into big description about her home that she grew up in, and it seemed pretty fancy, like with a meditation garden. And I was like, wow, that seems really nice. And then talking about her role that night, like what her situation that night, where she was, and all that we've ever known for all this time is that she was somewhere off campus until 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that...
Is there any speculation in the community, or someone said, hey, I was hanging out with her until
no
12:15? Like,
no.
Nothing has come out off book?
Not off the top of my head.
Well, This might be a good question for maybe some of our listeners. Put in the comments if you know anything about Bethany's whereabouts prior to 1 a.m. If you've heard anything, be it verified or not. I'd be curious to find out where she was, who was she hanging out with, because there could be, a cloud of suspicion if she's cahooting with somebody, maybe Bryan Kohberger off campus somewhere,
it's just weird that and that is the phrase, off campus until 1 a.m. Like, that's all they ever say. Well, and isn't it weird that nobody has, not a sorority sister, not a, someone at the public bar she might have been at,
right.
that I know of. So again, please say in the comments if I'm off base with that one. But so that's it. There's not a whole lot else to say about Bethany from that chapter.
And she is the least significant person in this event.
Well, or she's going to be the most significant person, because it has been stated that and this was early on when they thought they were going to have a preliminary hearing, that she was going to testify and that she was going to have exculpatory evidence in Bryan Kohberger's favor. And if you don't know that Bryan Kohberger is arrested and being charged with this crime, we haven't got to that part in the book yet, but yes. So supposedly, whatever her experience was that night, it was different than Dylan's. That's also the way it has been described. It's unique to her. And it's supposedly, going to make it seem like he's not the one.
Be interesting. We've heard exculpatory a couple times, and, again, not getting too far off the book and getting too far forward. But if there's something exculpatory out there, and I was Bryan Kohberger, the person sitting in jail for 2+ years, I'd be like, look, we got to get that in front of 60 Minutes, Dateline, 2020, whatever it is, because I'm rotting here in jail, because he looked frail
he looked bad at the last
hearing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how much of this is he willing to sit and wait for if he's truly innocent? Again, we said in, I think, our very first episode of us covering this case, if you were innocent, Kimberly Aponte, and you were the one being charged, you would be screaming from the rooftops.
I would, but there's a lot that I've learned about this case and some theories that I don't want to get into right now, but we will, that just make the most sense to me. I feel like this is a very complicated situation.
Yeah.
That would make him sit with his mouth shut and just wait it out. Like, it's going to take that long to get through everything in order to exonerate himself.
So let's get into Dylan.
Okay.
All right. Because Dylan, is the eyewitness, ear witness,
eyebrow witness,
and she's the one that has probably brought the most information about what happened that night to law enforcement. Whether we believe it all, because, was it a dream? Was it was it reality? She was hedging on some of that stuff. I think the defense even came out and was like, stop short of calling her an outright liar, but I mean,
that was in this most recent hearing.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much towed the line and said, she's lying. We can't trust her, and, the prosecution came back with their rebuttal to that, which I thought was very good. In the book, Dylan is from Boise.
Yes, and that's where the trial is going to be. What do you think about that?
I didn't know that until we listened to the book, and I didn't really make the connection until your ears and eyes popped up and was like, that's where they're having the trial. Yeah, it's a little bit of home field advantage, maybe for her, especially if she's on the guilter side of things. I don't know where she stands. I don't know if she's a Kohberger, and thinking that they got the wrong person here, so it'd be interesting when she testifies. But in the book,
I'd say the internet's going to break the day she testifies.
Oh my God.
We are waiting to hear, because she is the only surviving victim that they used her statements in the probable cause.
Correct.
They didn't use anything from Bethany.
No.
In the probable cause. It's all Dylan. In the book, he described how she was from Boise, talked about her dad a lot. That he was back in her life and all of that. And then that her bedroom was on the second floor. And in this book, he said on the second floor, but at the very, very beginning, we were told that both the survivors were on the first floor.
Yeah.
And then it turned into that Dylan originally went to sleep on the first floor or something like that. And then we discovered her bedroom was on the second floor. So there's always been a little bit of controversy and, not fully understanding that. And then she also, so she's the eyewitness. So she says, I saw a man in black walk past my door. He had bushy eyebrows, a mask on. In the book, he talks about, it was, around the, end of COVID time when people had been wearing masks to go out into the community. He even joked like to go on dates and stuff. So then I'm thinking, a medical mask? Like, is that what you're going to wear?
I think she said it was a black mask.
Right. But he made it in the book. He's portraying it as like a COVID mask.
But,
yeah. And so,
I thought he was just making the comparison that people were wearing masks. So it wasn't like that someone's in your house wearing a mask. It wouldn't be pre-COVID like, oh my God, there's a killer in my house.
Right.
It would be like, oh, there's somebody who's protecting themselves from COVID in our house.
Right.
That happens to be wearing all black, after I heard some screams, and so.
He did kind of, I don't know if he inserted this. He probably shouldn't because it's supposed to be nonfiction, but that she would think, is this a new friend of one of my roommates that, I'm not familiar with? And they were here visiting and they're leaving.
I think he said it was speculation that, could she have thought?
Yes.
I think that's how he was presenting, because he didn't, the perpetrator, whomever it was walking past her, didn't break stride, didn't stop, didn't slow down, didn't even like recognize that she was there. It was like hurriedly, but not running.
Yeah, not even running, just
walking
leaving the house
hurriedly.
Yeah. She said she heard Kaylee playing with her dog upstairs. That she thought that's what it was. She heard someone say someone's here, and it could have been Kaylee or Zanna. And I'm thinking that's two different directions because Kaylee's up on the 3rd floor. Zanna is like down the hallway from her.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think you'd be able to distinguish where that's coming from. And then someone crying.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk about this. She heard someone say, and I think it was said it was in Zanna's room, coming from Zanna's room, that someone says, it's okay, I'm here to help you. In the book, I think he said, it's okay, I'm going to help you. And to me, those are two very different things. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, I agree that I don't know if they actually put the line in the PCA. So that might be a good point of reference.
Oh, yeah.
If we could say that, this is what exactly was said, but you did point out the fact that they were two separate statements that have been leaked to the public.
To me, if someone says, I'm here to help you, that sounds professional.
Mm.
And if someone's just like, I'm going to help you, I don't know. I just think that's, to me, it also implies more than one person could have been the perpetrator, if that's what you're hearing. So those are all the things that we have known for a long time from the probable cause and statements being made that Dylan gave in her statements.
Yes.
At this last hearing, the defense attorney, she had gone through, Dylan and Bethany were both interviewed multiple times. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like the defense attorney was saying her statements changed. There were a lot of, I couldn't remember. It seemed like a dream. And she even, like you said, when we were talking earlier, she did everything short of calling her a liar during the hearing, saying she had memory problems and that she was like self-reported as having memory problems, probably in her statements. She probably must have said something like that. I'm just inferring that.
I think the prosecution came back though pretty nicely and was like, one of the things that the defense was harping on that she didn't know if it was real or if it was a dream. And the prosecution said everything that she was stating, right, that was going on was somehow either, fit with whatever evidence was there or how things transpired. So even if she says, gosh, I thought that was a dream, that what she was saying lined up with, how things could have happened, right?
Or
That
I
it
say
could
how
have
the prosecution wants them to happen.
Yeah, or how the prosecution wants it, but they didn't contradict how the case could be laid out, right? That they started upstairs. Well, I don't know if they started upstairs. I think I was dreaming. Okay, but our evidence shows that the perpetrator started upstairs with the murder and
Yeah, I get
ended
it.
downstairs.
Yeah.
And then they, we see them leaving with this footprint, heading out the door at this time. So even though you are saying, Dylan, that I could be dreaming, it still fits the narrative that investigators went in and saw and said, hey, I think these kids were unfortunately murdered first. These were second. These were third. That matches the interview that you had that she doesn't even believe that she thinks is true because I could be dreaming.
Yeah, but I mean,
so
any good lawyer is going to tear apart your statements and things like that. So that's the defense's strategy. That's the prosecutor's strategy. I do have some sympathy, empathy for saying the whole dream thing because we've been through some pretty tough, awful things. And usually for me, though, it's a little bit after the fact where I'm like, did that really happen?
Yeah.
Saying that kind of a thing. So I do understand that. So, I mean, I like the way this book is presented. The audio, we're listening to it. So it's not awful with the narrator. It's decent.
Did we want to talk about one more thing about Dylan though before we get into just how the book
wraps
up?
Yes.
Because we had a big debate about it, so I wonder what the community thinks about this. So Dylan is in height. How big?
I think 5'8".
I heard 5'10". I could be
wrong.
5'10"?
Yes, 5'10".
Is it 5'10"? Okay. So Dylan is 5'10", and I think there was a lot of noise around the fact that it couldn't be Kohberger because Dylan said the person was, as tall as her, and some people saying she was shorter than 5'10" or something. And Bryan is so massively tall at 6'2" that how could you confuse that? So it's not Bryan Kohberger inside the house.
Because I think she said as tall as me or taller, I think.
Correct. So in the book, what she says is, or what the author says that she says is, he is as tall as me or taller, just like you said. So it throws out the narrative of a 5'6", 5'8", maybe even 5'9" perpetrator. And it's somebody that's 5'10", 11, 6 feet, 6'1", 6'2", all fit in that range, right? They're definitely taller than me. By how much, I don't know.
We're going to have to go back to this last hearing, and I'm going to have to pull out the clip because that did get brought up, but I cannot remember how they were talking about it. And I'm thinking maybe it was in her statements, the way it was worded, that they're making it seem like it was different than the 5'10" or taller. And the only reason I bring that up is because I've heard many people online after that hearing saying, oh my gosh, it was someone shorter.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I didn't hear that part or I didn't pay attention to it close enough. So I need to go back and pull that clip.
So the reason I wanted to bring this up again, I, come out to the community and say, what have you heard?
Yes.
How tall is Dylan? What was, I know there was a statement, I believe there was a statement in the PCA. So we could go back and look at that. But we should look at, how tall is she truly? And what was the actual statement being used or what's out there? Because, they could come back and say, well, we have the actual notes of this interview. And in the notes, maybe that's what the defense is starting to say. The first time they interviewed her, she said they were 5'10" or taller. Maybe the second time they interviewed her, they said, well, probably maybe as tall as I am.
Yes.
Right. Or something to
Yes.
that effect, which could skew it from 5'10" and taller to 5'10" and shorter. If she's 5'10.
It was something.
Yeah.
It was something with the wording. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So that's where I want to come to the community. What have you heard about that? You know, what is out there, and what is the speculation that is the perpetrator as tall, taller than, or shorter than Dylan, and how tall is Dylan?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious.
Yep. So we're ending with Dylan going into her room after the perpetrator leaves. She locks herself in a room. She goes to sleep all night and doesn't discover anything until close to noon the next morning. And that's where we're going to pick up on the next episode.
Yep. So we'll trudge through this book. It's you know, it's probably long. There's probably a lot of chapters. We'll probably condense some of it because a lot of it is, you know, storytelling. But I think we hit, you know, on the people first. We'll get into some of the evidence and things that happened and what led the police where they are today. You know, we'd love to hear your feedback on this and see what you think about, what's it called? While Idaho Slept.
While Idaho Slept. J. Reuben Appelman.
Mm-hmm.
We hope you join us back next time. Bye.
Bye.